Last time I seen a shorty like you, my crib had cable. I don't remember the last time that my crib had cable. Take my hand, I'll say, hey, shorty for invaders. Yeah, it hurt when we fell from heaven, well, I can't find your head. Last time I seen a shorty like you, my crib had cable. I don't remember the last time that my crib had cable. Take my hand, I'll say,
alright, 3, 2, 1, and we are back! Game of Thrones, House of the Dragons. Let's go! What's good, Corey? Welcome back to the Circle Club. Man, you guys were feeling trailer. You guys were feeling that trailer. We appreciate the love and support. Check out episode 5 trailer as well, because we're about to shoot that right after this. Corey, how you doing, my man?
I'm good, dude. I'm good. I'm feeling the hype of the show. I feel like we're just constantly getting good quality. Man. I'm hyped. Good quality. I haven't been disappointed thus far, so I'm very happy about that with this show.
Dude, I said last week, best episode yet. They've elevated. Now, when you first started episode 1 and 2, you're like, okay, we're back in Thrones. Let me chew on this. Yeah. Episode 3, you're like, okay. Now I'm feeling, and then 4, you go, we're back. We're back. Not back. Yeah. We're MJ back,
Yeah, 100%. I think a part of that, though, comes from a lot of what we've been learning about in these first 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. Some of those pieces and groundwork that was laid out is starting to come to fruition, right? You're starting to see how some of those strings intertwine with one another, right? Like myself and you said, right, we've already kind of made a couple predictions about this show that's starting to come to fruition, right? And I think that's why we're really enjoying this episode, right? We'll get really into it, but like, for example, the Daemon and Rhaenyra situation going on, the Kristen Cole and Rhaenyra situation going on, right? So there's a lot of things that I think did a very good job of laying out the pieces there that the fruits came to sow within this episode, and something that me and Tyrone talk about a lot within the videos we make with the MCU and the Marvel universe is about the pacing of the show. And I think something that we definitely will talk about a little bit more is I think how well they've done the time shift in moving forward and making these jumps without us feeling like we've missed anything, right? Yes. And I think they're really not giving us any fluff, right? Everything has intention that we've seen thus far on the screen. And as I say and repeat myself now, I think a lot of it comes so within this episode that makes it very enjoyable.
Yeah, and listen, this is why it is so important that you guys subscribe, because the way Corey and I are interpreting and watching this show, we have no book background other than watching Game of Thrones. So we're not predicting based on, what was supposed to happen based on the book. We're doing it based on what we're seeing in front of us. And so a great example of that is our prediction that Rhaenyra would get involved with Sir Cole and Daemon. Now, if you read the book, you would know Laenor Velaryon ends up with her. And at this point now, this is where we're like at the end of episode 4, she's supposed to get wedded to him. But we didn't know that before. We were just, going based off what we saw, what we think was going to happen. And so our predictions and discussion about this, just so you're fully aware, has nothing to do with the book. Completely with the TV show. And with that being said, Corey, Daemon walks in and is looking like, hey, you guys miss me? Almost Joker-esque, right? Like, just ha ha
like,
ha ha ha.
What's like nobody knows what's about to happen right now. Like it could be the spectrum of possibilities is limitless when he walks into that room.
What I will say about this episode that I also found very fascinating was how it was shot, right? So let me get the director's name. It was directed by Claire Kilner. Now she's done some rom-coms. She did The Wedding Date. And what I think is super interesting about this episode is the whole episode just felt very like intimate. Like it felt very like it was done from a woman's perspective. Like as Daemon walks in, right? you see Rhaenyra following, but she's not following from a sinister standpoint. She's not following from what's Daemon about to do. There's almost like it's a combination of that, but there's also sort of a lust, and like the way the camera moved and panned, it felt as if you were like watching Rhaenyra kind of almost like, man, this guy's kind of attractive, or like, oh, I like this power, like I like this, that he's a confident man.
It felt very specific and like almost more close up, right? And intentional, and like more like slowed down in a sense, right? I feel like a lot of times, right? And especially when you look at that brothel scene, right? Like the way you look at a lot of brothel scenes from Game of Thrones, right? And even kind of earlier in this episode or episodes with Daemon, right? Like it was very more wide angled, like aggressive,
harsh,
like you just felt like there's just more going on. Whereas with the scene within the brothel in this episode, it felt more slowed down. It felt more sensual. It felt more like very intentional behind everything that was being seen, right? And like we've mentioned, right, like there's a lot of subtleties with these close-up shots and angles that they're making that's, to I think what you're saying, giving a very different perspective on how they want us to interpret this episode.
Claire Kilner did insane with that, and I felt like what was so cool too is like the show's called House of the Dragon, but it's Game of Thrones, right? And so with that, even like you have to be meticulous and smooth about some of those decisions that you're making, and it felt like that with the camera work and stuff for this episode. And speak of that, I want to get your reaction on the brothel scene. But what I initially felt was like I sort of interpreted as Daemon was trying to lure Rhaenyra in. He saw that she wanted some freedom, some fun, and she's never seen the commoners, it appears. Like she sees this play about herself, and she's like, oh, these people don't matter. They don't know what they're talking about. And he's like, well, if you're gonna rule them, and that was also sort of like that maturity that she was talking about with Daemon, where you're like, yeah, he's making some valid points here. He brings her down to the brothel, and like it's like what you said, like it. Compared to Game of Thrones, it wasn't as aggressive and harsh. They were sort of like a sensual. You said like people were exploring their sexuality and liberation, right? And so he thought that he was gonna bring her there, having known that she's a virgin, she's never engaged in any of these sort of activities. That she was gonna be like, oh, Daemon, I'm in love with you, and like sort of lure her in. But what ends up happening, she flips the switch. And they kind of showcase, which they don't do in television too often, that women, as well as men, also like sex. And women can control that situation. And that's exactly what she did there. Like, she flipped it on Daemon to the point where Daemon was like, I know I can't actually have sex with her because that would just, like, I'd get my head cut off, essentially, right? Like, it's not going to happen. But he wanted to. You can tell he wanted to. And he starts to try to kiss her a little bit, but she flips on him like, oh no, I'm in charge here. I'm in control here, just so you're aware. So I thought, for me, that was like, every episode I see a little bit more of why Rhaenyra should be queen, and also elements of Daenerys Targaryen that I'm like clearly was passed down, genetically or whatever elements to be a Targaryen was passed down. And that's what that scene in particular really, I thought was just super well done. And honestly, I thought it was one of the best scenes. And like, and I think, again, to contrast it with Game of Thrones, a lot of times those scenes were more so like, oh, here we go again, another sex scene. But there wasn't a lot of intention behind those. But there was a lot of tension, a lot of meaning behind it, double meaning, right? Hidden meaning. And so I really thought this was one of the best scenes so far in this season. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, like I said, I thought they would always get together. I thought there was some type of interest there from both sides, right? I think Daemon clearly showed that, getting the necklace for her in the first episode. I think Rhaenyra shows that with her intrigue that she clearly shows whenever her uncle's around, right? This is a girl that really has been pushing off every male you could think of within this entire show that we've experienced, right? And I think The only other person that she showed a little interest to too was Sir Kristen Cole, right? And I think when you see this scene, like to what you're saying, and throughout this whole show, Rhaenyra has been a go-getter, right? Like she doesn't really allow somebody saying to her no, including her father, who's the king,
Right.
to stop her from doing what she wants to do, right? So when she kind of gets into this situation, yeah, maybe newer for her, but she kind of leaps into whatever it is that she personally wants. And like you said, she really wanted it with Daemon. I think Daemon losing that control is what really drives him away, per se, right? And it goes to show once she goes away and Rhaenyra's kind of left there, a lot of times I feel like in a situation like that, they would leave the girl to be vulnerable, right? And it's another shout out to the director, who really I think exemplifies exactly who Rhaenyra is. She's not going to be the type of person that's going to go back to her room crying and just call it a night, right? Like although she's upset about it, she's like, I'm the princess, right? Like, like yeah, you're
I'm
right.
a baddie.
Like I can do what I want. So you know what? I'm gonna do what I want. And lo and behold, right? Who's the Kingsguard, right?
And before you get there, I just want to say too, you know, to close off the Rhaenyra brothel thing is she also like in real time develops this thing of like, wait a minute, why is it okay for men to go and sleep around and do whatever? Because like, you know, Daemon's like, he's like, man, when you're the queen or the king of this, like you can
do whatever you want.
You can do whatever you want, man. Like marriage, that's just
true,
political.
in a sense.
But she says, but not when you're a woman. And I think that is sort of true. It's different because your job is to get an heir. And so, and what's interesting is we see that even with Daenerys, who's like I'm not like that. I don't care what, you know, I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm not going to do that. But sorry to cut you off about Sir Cole, but I thought that was also an interesting element to see that she was sort of developing that in real time of like, you know what, this system is BS. It don't even matter. You know what I'm saying? So
and the king kind of admits to that, right? Before
he does.
Kristen Cole, he says it's really not about the truth. It's about perception, right?
Yes.
And it kind of in a lot of the show, right? We talk about it being this fake fantasy medieval times, but it really does reflect a lot of reality.
Totally.
Today, right? And going back to that thing with the guys can and the girls can't, it's a reality in a double standard nonetheless, right? We admit it's a double standard and it's definitely not correct.
Right.
But it's a reality of real life, right? And seeing how Rhaenyra has to deal with the repercussions of that is so true to form, right? And when you get the king in there, right, it kind of goes back to real life, right? Like these celebrities and billionaires, right? They have all this power and influence and money that, yeah, they can get away with a lot of things that other people can't, right? But again, it always comes down to perception, right? Why the media controls a lot of the perception of what we think, right? Not to get into like conspiracy theories and things like that, but I think it's a great way of bringing reality, and this is my point more so, it's a great way of bringing reality for individuals like us as viewers in this world into a fictional world that makes it feel real. And I think they did a tremendous job with that. That in turn brings us into a situation with Rhaenyra and Sir Kristen Cole that a person of Rhaenyra's status can absolutely pull anybody she wants, right?
Absolutely.
So she realizes, and she's always been this go-getter. When she gets back to that room, she's not sulking. She goes, you know what? Damon's absolutely right. I can do whatever I want. And you know what? I'm going to take something that I want right now. And she puts Sir Kristen Cole in a position that, again, if you go to double standards, would be very troublesome if it was a male putting that girl in there. But as you can see, again, double standards aren't always right. But an individual like myself sitting there like, yo, Sir Kristen Cole, my guy, you better
close the deal. You better close the deal, guy.
I know you got a lot of iron on right now, but you better allow this to happen, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, but there's also too
there's reality here though with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra though, it's more of a statement about Rhaenyra, right? And her being able to be her own individual and not allowing the influences of other people in society really from swaying her from making the decisions she ultimately wants to make, in and of itself. And I think it's a great statement for Rhaenyra and not making her the victim, which I think she is going to become a victim more so moving forward of circumstance of this world and losing out on things I think that are rightfully hers. But I think a big testament to Rhaenyra is she is not going to be the type of individual that lays over like her friend Allison Hightower, who will get into it a little bit.
Yes, and I think, you know, you mentioned the celebrity example. It's also just like an everyday example too of like, you know, if you know, hypothetically you're like, hey Tyrone, man, I just got with 50 women, and man, it was a time, blah blah blah. I like a lot of guys would be like, hey, that's awesome, man. Your girlfriend says, oh, I slept with 50 dudes. Then you're kind of like, whoa, man, like you kind of need to slow it down, chill out a little bit. And I think that same sort of double standard exists in this world, which is why it makes it so relatable. Now with Sir Criston too, the other thing I will say is as well is in Game of Thrones, when the men want someone, they grab them, they rape them. You know, it's assault. They like don't even, there's no question. When she approaches Sir Criston, she's trying to be sensual. She's like, come on, do you want it? Like, and they also have already this like sort of relationship there as well. But when he's like, no, we can't, like she's like gentle about it and slow. Like, I think if he honestly said like, no, like I can't do this, she wouldn't have, like that would have been the end of it, you know? And I think that's also a very big difference with how some of these things are shot and approached.
And I think to add to my point, right, about Rhaenyra, right, she's very, very methodical about how she goes about going with Sir Criston Cole, right? Very, it's almost funny to watch what Daemon just does to her as a first experience, and then she just turns around from that quick experience that she just dealt with, and almost like picks up this game herself instantaneously.
Yeah,
but she does it so much more masterfully and not connivingly, right? Where she almost makes it impossible to say no as Sir Criston Cole. You can see him in the moment, right? Like thinking, like you can see him, like, you know, he ultimately wants to, but he's like, a man of honor, right?
I can't.
He made a vow, right, as a King's Guard, and he even talked about it in a previous episode. Like he could have, like he's had his day. Like he's done all that, right? If he wanted to marry, he could have done that. Like he's chosen his path, and now she's really putting his path at jeopardy by making him do this, right? Yeah. Because if somebody were to walk in on there, right, as we see with Otto and something we'll get into again, it's not Rhaenyra who will face the consequences. It is the other houses, because at the end of the day, this show is about the dragon, and when it comes to the dragon, they really can do no wrong. They're not gonna just off the air as a Targaryen, right? So Sir Criston Cole is put in a precarious situation there, and although we'd like to say every guy would say yes, and most likely of course they would, given the context of what he's given us within this show and the path he's chosen, you can tell there's a little bit of him that wants to say no, and he understands it's probably not the thing he should be doing, but inevitably, right, Rhaenyra gets what she wants at the end of the day. I think it's more a statement to Rhaenyra and her abilities.
I think and I think that is also sort of like when you think about how Game of Thrones and a lot of these shows are like male written, male directed, right? Like I think men in their heads sort of like build up this idea of like, if I reject this girl, then she's gonna go back to her room crying, like you said. But in reality, it's like just the same way a guy would be like, I'm on to the next one, you know, whatever. It is. That's how it is, you know. Like
thing.
So that's why I think it's cool that they added that into the show as well. But then we move on to this controversy. It's sort of leaked. Sir Hightower has eyes in the sky and on the ground. And honestly, to his defense, he should have done that, because as the hand of the king, you want eyes everywhere. You need to know what the streets are thinking or feeling, to have these little spies around. So he sort of got the short end of the stick there, in my opinion, because I think he was just doing his job. Now, where he messed up was he clearly tried to get Allison to marry King Viserys, and that was obvious. So that was where his one mishap was, and so he got his punishment for doing that, in my opinion. But for what he did to protect the crown per se, I think that he had good intentions, but at the same time, he knew that this was just another way for him to get Aegon on the throne. But ultimately, I think it's also a tough position too, because and the actor did so well in that scene, because it was sort of like if you saw your boy's sister with someone else, you're like, man, do I tell him? I have to tell him, right? There's a code amongst your brother, but at the same time, you're like, this is just an uncomfortable situation, and that scene was just really well done. What was your thoughts on that scene?
Yeah, so I think they did a very, very good job with that. I think it changed my perspective on a lot of previous thoughts I had, right? I do owe Mr. King Viserys an apology. I'll get into that in a few, but I thought, on the note of Otto, he always had this self-interest, and Viserys kind of admits to it, right? Everybody has self-interest, right? And kind of we talked about from the first episode. Pay attention to how these other houses are trying to lift themselves up, because it is the Game of Thrones. Whether you have the opportunity at the throne itself or not, you have to find your way to move up that ladder, right? And obviously circumstances helped out the Hightowers to work their way up, and we've seen a lot of it throughout the show with Otto sending his daughter to go slip in with the king, from him trying to boot Daemon out, right, to trying to get Aegon in, right? A lot of they've done a great job of showing that self-interest, right? And Otto, although like you said, might have had good intentions behind them, it goes back to why my man and me, you and me are in the business world. We love talking about the business. This is why they make us take the ethics trainings every single year, right? Because even with good intentions, ethics can be broken, right? I think what was great about this is I've started over the last few episodes to gain a little bit more respect for Viserys, right? You started to notice him putting his foot down a lot of times when people were trying to run over him and trying to lead him to make a decision, right? And I think this is the episode again. You reap what you sow. They've done a good job of laying out the groundwork where he finally lays his foot down with Rhaenyra, with Otto, with all the individuals, Daemon himself, right? And he's like, I'm done with it, right? And he's been a fair.
He's dishing out the punishments.
He's given way more leniency than probably he should have at this time, but he's been fair.
He's been so fair
to the people that are close to him. So now, when he comes to Otto and he's like, "Hey, listen, I put the dots together," and the biggest dot was obviously Allison, right? She clearly has no interest or emotional investment into him. She can't even call him Viserys. She refers to him as husband, right? And that's a big tell there, right? Because when you're not referring to somebody by their name, it almost feels like an obligation, right? Like her husband's an obligation to her.
That's a very good thing that you picked up there, Corey. That's a very intentional script decision that they made to call him husband.
Correct. And there's a reason why they have left out the Allison and Viserys hooking up at all on scene. I think for there's that uncomfortableness to the age gap, right? But I think now them finally injecting them having sex on scene, right, within the show is at the perfect time, because it delivers that blow that she is so uninterested, right? To the husband comment I just made, she's just laying there, right? She clearly is not attempting to be better like Daenerys tried to with Khal Drogo, right? She tried to make the effort to show that she wanted it, right? And that she was involved, right? And I think that you notice that, right? When you're
of course.
So Viserys putting the pieces together that Allison was a move by Otto, I think is the thing that we always pointed to and saying, dude, this guy is up to something. He's out for himself, and seeing Viserys be able to boo him but not really off him shows a lot of restraint.
Well, also on that note too, there was this moment where he's talking to Rhaenyra about what happened, and she's like, all right, you want me to marry Laenor Valerian, whatever, fine. Because he's like, I'm not asking you anymore. I'm telling you, this was going down.
Correct.
And she's like, okay, you want to play that game? Well, put your big boy pants on and fire Otto Hightower. Because you know, there's no trust amongst your council at this point, you know. So and I thought that was a huge moment from her too.
It's another correct. I'm glad you brought that up because I was honestly kind of glazing over that part and overlooking that part. Yeah. But it goes to show that this show, in my opinion, is completely about Rhaenyra.
100%.
Right? Every single interaction is so intertwined through Rhaenyra right now that her making that move is just another example of how ready she is as a queen, right? And this show is I think so clearly pointing to the fact that obviously, like, because we've watched Game of Thrones, we know there's never been a queen on the throne. We know Rhaenyra is gonna get beat out of getting this throne some way somehow, right?
Yeah.
Most likely it'll probably be her brother, but who knows? It could be Daemon taking over for all we know, right? I know the fact that Rhaenyra will not take that throne because of how they've established the connection to Game of Thrones. And Game of Thrones clearly stating there's no queen. But the greatest
unless she does get it, but you know the winners get to write history, right? So
correct, and that's a great point. She could get it, and they change history, right? But I think if she does lose that throne, we've seen thus far how Rhaenyra is built for it, how she could be that queen, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how this shapes up where she gets booted out, right? Because ultimately, the way history has been written, to your point, there has never been a queen on the Iron Throne. So whether she gets it taken away from her some way, somehow, whether it be before she gets on it or after she gets off of it, right? It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because Rhaenyra right now is showing very much capable to be on the throne, and that is a prime example of it.
I got a little quick prediction. And then we got about 3 minutes left, so we'll go through what we liked, didn't like, favorite characters, and all that. But perhaps Aegon gets on the throne, but it's her actually playing the Littlefinger role, and she's the one making the decisions. So that's also a possibility.
A better question to ask, though, too, right now, before we completely segue away, is with Otto out, who do you believe is going to be the next hand for Viserys? I have a prediction on who I think it absolutely should be, given what we've seen in this show.
And who is that?
I don't know if that's who it would be, right? And I'm going to mess up the name, but it's the individual who's been constantly telling Viserys that he should have gotten wed to the Valyrians. And then he was the one that also told Viserys that that Rhaenyra should get wed to Laenor because it would bridge that gap. This man, since the start of the show, in my opinion, has taken complete self-interest out of his opinions to the king, right? And I think he is the most
Lord Lyman, I believe is his name.
Yes, I think that's who it is, right? Because Viserys even came back to him being like, "Oh, I bet you think your son would be best for my daughter," and he was like, "No, on the contrary, I think it should be the Valyrians." Back to what I told you before and what you should have done, right?
Yes.
So and you know, you and me are Bernie Sanders guys. I love consistency, right? Not political. This is why I like my man Bernie. He's been very consistent throughout his years. This guy has been very consistent to Viserys, so I would very much enjoy him becoming the next hand. And it would be interesting to see who gets actually put there, because I feel like if he gets put there, Viserys is going to be in good hands. If he doesn't, it might be the downfall to Viserys, because Otto, although he was self-interested, I don't think himself was trying to claim the throne. He was definitely trying to help his family go to power, right, with the Targaryens. And now, if this man does not get named the next hand, who is, and where are their self-interests, and are they worse than Otto Hightower?
That's a great question. Comment down below what you think who should be or who would be. Corey, let me get some rapid fire questions from you real quick. What did you like the most in this episode?
I gotta go with Viserys. Honestly, I gotta give him his due. Although I want to go with Rhaenyra. She's shown a lot. I think she's been showing that, so I'll give it a subtle nod because I really do want to give it to Rhaenyra. But I owe Viserys. I said Viserys was my least favorite character. I thought he was very weak. He was showing a lot of signs of weakness. I think this man has shown a lot of strength, especially within this episode, to kind of put his foot down, set Daemon, set Otto, set Rhaenyra straight, right?
Yeah.
And I've gained a lot of respect for him. So I really, really, really shout out to Viserys, King Viserys in this episode.
Yes, I think I agree. He's definitely the best character this episode. I thought the worst character this episode was sort of Allison Hightower. Like she did have some speckle of hope in her there, but you just see someone who's completely given up, someone who knows the system, someone who's like, you know, I'm stuck. You're lucky that you even have these options. Like, and I think that little line too is where she slipped up, where Rhaenyra is like, what do you mean you didn't have an option? You know what I'm saying? Like, because she says that little line to her, and I think Rhaenyra put 2 and 2 together to be like, oh, I already knew it, but now it's confirmed that, you know, your father forced you. So I think that was her in a moment of weakness and her putting her guard down and all that stuff. Also, just accusing Rhaenyra as well. Like, I think that, like, if you hear this from your father who you know put you on the throne, is clearly like eyeing for it, you gotta be like, my dad's sort of a shady guy, you know, and Rhaenyra's done nothing but want the throne, so she wouldn't do anything to mess that up, right?
Totally,
I felt that she sort of slighted her girl, which, you know, really isn't her girl anymore. So
yeah, so this is I'm glad you said that. I'm gonna have to call somebody else for some other reasons, but I want to comment on what you just said, right? Allison, thus far, I've been trying to figure out whether she's good, whether she's bad, and I've kind of finally come to the conclusion she's neither good nor bad. This girl is just completely manipulated and lost. She's all alone, right? And like you said, she and you're gonna see it, right? And there was something that I noticed when we looked at the cast, we saw there was older versions, and no offense to the actress, right, that plays the older Allison, but she looked almost a lot more like weathered, tired almost from the scenes that they had shown to, or the pictures that we had seen for the cast, compared to Rhaenyra. And I think it makes a lot of sense because Allison's character, after a lot of these years, I think is gonna be very beat down, right? She's been trampled for a lot of these years, and you can tell through this episode that this flip-floppy nature comes from the the lack of control that she has within her life, right? And that's why she accuses Rhaenyra, right? But doesn't really believe her father, but then defends Rhaenyra too to Viserys, right? She's on this, and that's what I get from this is, right, because she has such lack of control within her life, she is just in this constant this trap, like you said. She's just stuck in the trap.
I mean, she literally says, I'm not myself. I feel like I haven't been myself in such a long time, right? So that's a very key line.
Yeah, so I like that shout out there. And the reason why I'm not going to give it to Allison is because I do feel like she's a victim, right? So I really don't want to bash on her. I got to bash on my man Daemon, though, right? Back to like what I said in the first episode. I said my favorite character was Daemon, right? And I said I didn't like Viserys.
Man, you did. You flip-flopped, yeah.
And now I'm gonna hit the flip-flop button, right? Like, I still think there's a piece of Daemon there that again, we're gonna point to Jaime Lannister. Throughout a lot of the initial seasons, he's seen some of those signs, and he'd always just choose to be bad, and he finally comes around. And how we all know Game of Thrones ended. Jaime still just couldn't get over that final hump, right? He goes back to Cersei, right? And I'm starting to feel it even more from Daemon, and I'm starting to lose that lack of excitement towards Daemon now, especially after this episode and what he does towards Rhaenyra specifically, because he does come back seeming like a changed man, right? Like he seemed like he proved himself. I am worthy of the respect I deserve, right? And then for him to lay down the title, right, come back, pledge loyalty to his brother, you're feeling like, okay, this guy really has it going for him, right? Like he's really starting to, I think, lean towards what I thought was going to happen. Him and Rhaenyra claiming their right together to take that throne, right? And then Daemon pulls the bad guy, the F-boy move at the end, right? And
self-sabotage, honestly, is what it is.
And then the real move is to lie about it too, and that's a big
so that was gonna be,
that's the true colors for me, right? In that moment, lying about what actually had happened and really ruining her perceptive sanctity, is troublesome. And Rhaenyra obviously puts herself in a predicament, because although she did not do it with Daemon, she did do it with Sir Kristen Cole, right? Which, and there is one comment I want to make on that at the end after I'm done bashing on Daemon, but Daemon really showed his true colors within this episode, which made me change my script on him. But a predicament that comes out of this episode that I did not want to leave untouched was, although Rhaenyra comes to a solution with her father that she will wed Laenor, but he has to get rid of Otto. Viserys shows that last glimpse of why he is the king, bringing the what looks to be the plan B concoction to Rhaenyra, which puts Rhaenyra in a big troublesome moment, right? Because although it is all about perception and they can control the perception and however they might do it and shake it out to the masses, Rhaenyra needs to take that plan B.
She needs to, because but then if she does,
because she got with Sir Kristen Cole, but then it only makes it look like she did it with Daemon. So perception, and this might lead to what maybe changes things for Viserys, right? Like maybe he does think that she did do it with Daemon now because she takes something like that, right? And it really wasn't the case, but
I think she could definitely flip that and be like, listen, you told me I had to follow my duties, so I'm doing my duties. You clearly don't trust me anymore as your daughter, blah blah. I think there is an out for her, but to your point, he did say perception is everything. So if she says I'm not taking that, that's sort of a risk, a dice that she has to roll, right? It would definitely be interesting. One thing I want to say before we get out of here is one thing I did not like this episode was, but you had mentioned that Daemon lied. And the only reason I didn't like that is because I felt that was a good opportunity for Daemon to almost put himself in position for the throne, to be like, listen, I could have done that and I could make these crazy mistakes, but I'm choosing not to do that. You know, and like he has these opportunities to prove, like as the king said, I've given you plenty of chances. Like he clearly wants Daemon to be on that throne. When Allison is like, oh, we have a gallery, he's like laughing, like we don't care about that. Like, you know, like he likes Daemon. That's his brother, right?
Totally.
But it just, and I think Daemon makes the wrong choices. I think
Daemon's and this is what I say about true colors, right? Because I think Daemon's play there was to ruin her sanctity, right? Mm-hmm. And force Viserys' hand to wed Rhaenyra to him, right?
Yeah.
And I think that hand is shown when he says, wed Rhaenyra to me, right?
Yeah.
There's your solution. And it backfires on him. Because maybe that could have been something that was possible, right?
Yeah.
If he gains the respect of the land again, he's gained the respect of Viserys, but then he goes and does that, and now people are looking down upon Daemon again. They're like, oh, yep, he's up to his old ways. He hasn't changed now.
Right.
Like you said, in that moment, he tells the truth and he says, no, I did bring her out, but I wanted to help show her what this world really is like.
Correct.
What the common folk are saying.
Correct.
What reality is, right?
Correct.
She needs to see this if she's going to be an heir one day, right? And you're holding her back from that. But I did not ruin that, right? But here's something that we could do. And then he brings up his proposal, right? Viserys might take it a lot more seriously, right? But
yeah,
at the end of the day, that's not how Viserys sees it, right? And
no.
Viserys laid his foot down, and he's the king, and I respected the moves that he made to end this episode.
Absolutely. All right, we got to get out of here, but make sure you guys check out our episode 5 trailer reaction on our channel. It'll be linked down below, or you can just hit the channel button and you'll see it as a feature. Corey, as always, my man, thank you for coming on. Make sure you guys subscribe because we make new content every single week. We'll try to get these videos going on Sunday nights from now on, but, you know, every once in a while we got to do a little audible. Corey, my man, thank you for coming on. As always, make sure you guys check out what's next. Make sure you subscribe to the Circle Club, and we'll see you in the next video. And remember, just be you. Peace.